Howdy folks, welcome back. Not an update video, sorry. I wanted to get an update video out because there's been some crazy stuff going on with the weather, a lot of snow. Cool stuff. It's interesting to see the animals in the winter. They're a lot hardier than you would think. You know, when you think of barnyard animals, you don't generally think, well, maybe you think that they're hardy, but I'm telling you, this has been a brutal winter so far. We're only in the middle of fucking December. These things are tanking it. I cannot believe it. It is remarkable, and it gives me a lot of inspiration, because if they can do it, and they don't got a fucking fire, I think I can do it. But anyways, not an update video. Unfortunately, the camera, I always forget the term, but the camera that doesn't look at you, not the one I'm using right now, because I'm looking at myself recording this right now, but the other camera, which I think is called the front-facing camera, does not work. The audio just is fucking blown out. It doesn't work. So I'm going to have to figure out a way of recording it where I can do the audio in like post or something. I don't generally do that, so it's going to take a little bit longer than usual for me to figure out how to get that to work. But you will get an update, so don't worry about it. Some cool stuff. If you aren't in an area that gets a lot of snow, it's kind of cool, kind of crazy, and I think it's worth documenting. So I'm definitely going to see if I can get that going here. Now, what I did want to talk about, though, is just some stuff I've been thinking about, just reflections on simple living, things like that. Maybe some motivation if you're in a spot in life, or maybe you want to do something that's kind of like this, or maybe you just think you're weak as a man. And again, most of my videos are targeted at men, so I don't think any women watch these fucking videos, so I don't think you have to worry about it. But if you're just feeling weak, if you feel like a fucking piece of shit, just, I'd like to, something I love to do is to offer motivation to people that are in a bad spot, or maybe they're not confident, maybe they don't think they have what it takes, and I'm always big on promoting the fact that no matter who you are, if you got a fucking Y chromosome in you got the fucking power, man. I'm telling you. You got it in you. And I always try to drive that point home because I'm fucking telling you, man. I'm fucking telling you, man. I never in my wildest fucking dreams thought I would be sitting where I am right now in a building I built myself on land that I own with animals that I'm taking care of, building towards a legacy that I could have never thought of in my wildest dreams in my youth. And I am probably one of the most unlikely people, if you want to look at it from that perspective, that would go down this route with the intensity that I've gone down this route with. I've talked about this previously, but, I wasn't necessarily, and I'm still not the strongest person in the world. I'm not, fucking very athletic. I'm not whatever. But I'm telling you, if you put yourself out there and you're forced, obviously I put myself in a position where I, have to perform at a higher level. But if you force yourself in any aspect of life to push past your limits and really put your body to the test, you would be absolutely astounded and amazed at what you could accomplish if you simply put your mind and body to it. It is unfucking real. And some of the things that I've been dealing with the coming winter being brutal and all that, is something that I call, and maybe this is a shared term, but something that's called metabolic adjustment. Now, to discuss this idea, I'd like to discuss what the purpose of the metabolism in the body is. People use the term metabolism and all this stuff, talk about thyroid conditions, whatever. But I don't think a lot of people really understand what the metabolism is for. The purpose of the metabolism in the body of most creatures, and especially mammals, warm-blooded creatures, is the regulation of internal body temperature. So adjusting to your environment, the consumption of calories to keep up your body's temperature to where it needs to be versus the outside temperature. Now, obviously, there are logical limits as far as how effective this can be. So if it's like extremely cold, like we had some days where it was in the negatives Fahrenheit, negative Fahrenheits most of the day, and at night it would get really fucking cold. No matter how much you adjust yourself, that really isn't, you can't really deal with that very effectively. There's things you can do, and you can definitely be better at dealing with it, but as far as being comfortable in that type of weather, I don't think the human body is capable of adjusting to such extremes. Same in the opposite direction, you know, if you're dealing with like 120 degree fucking weather, I have very serious doubts that the body can comprehend and deal with that extreme. But there's a very large gradient that the body can cope with if you force it to. And, you know, I'm not in an area where the summers get particularly hot. You know, it gets maybe on the hottest days in the lower 90s. And that's like once in a blue moon. You know, it's usually not in the 90s. I don't deal well with hot, warm weather, exceptionally warm weather. And, you know, I'm just not a fan of that. So that's why I am where I am. I'm much better in the cold than I am in the warm weather. So, but my observations have generally been in the opposite direction, you know, dealing more with cold weather. And the prospect of adjusting myself to deal with the opposite end of that spectrum. So, something that has been extremely interesting to me is the ability that I have now to deal with colder temperatures without being uncomfortable. Now, for example, it's 50 degrees in this room. Around there, it might be like 49, 48, I'm not too sure. Point is, it's colder than what most people generally have their rooms set to be. And I have absolutely no problem. This is like fucking, this is like a nice summer's day to me. You know, 50 fucking degrees. It's nice. I don't even have the fire going right now. I had it going about 6 hours ago, 7 hours ago when I went to work. It just happens to be warm enough today. By warm, I mean about 20 degrees Fahrenheit. That the place didn't cool down to 40, 30, things like that. And it's crazy to me how it wasn't easy. It was very difficult. It was very strenuous. You know, it was painful at first. But once your body gets used to it, it's like breathing. You know, you don't really even think about it. You know, it's really crazy. It really is. And, you know, I don't have to wear as much clothes, say when it's 20 degrees out, that, like, compared to most other people. Especially because I do a lot of hard work, you know, keeping up with the animals and doing all the shit I have to do. So, it's kind of crazy when you use the human body in the way that, biologically and evolutionarily speaking, it was meant to be used. How effective it is and how strong it is at coping with unideal circumstances. And I feel like in the modern era, people have this perception of the human body that it's a fragile piece of shit that can't really do anything, and it's got to be under certain conditions, and you get uncomfortable easy, and things are painful. But that's not true. That's just a product of modernity. That is the furthest thing. The human body is fucking unbelievably remarkable in how adept it is at adjusting to different things, which is why the fuck we're at where we're at. I mean, we couldn't get to this fucking place if we were that fragile. It simply wouldn't happen. So, for that regard, the reason I'm talking about this is that a lot of people think, because of modern technology and industrialism and things like that, that you have lost your edge, that you don't have what it takes to go out there and deal with extremes of weather, temperature, and cope with, you know, things, unpleasant realities, hunger, weather, fucking anything like that. You have that ability still. That's not gone. It's deep in you. You gotta fucking provoke it to come out. You gotta put yourself in tough situations. You gotta fucking make it real hard on yourself. But if you force yourself to deal with unideal situations and circumstances where it's not an ideal temperature. You're not eating ideal amounts of food. You're not, things just aren't ideal. Your body will fucking kick in, and you are going to be amazed at what it can do. And this goes for both men and women. This is a universal thing. Men are generally better at dealing with these types of extremes than women are, but they are also very adept. But they are a bit more sensitive due to the nature of their biological structure. In some ways, because the interesting thing about women is that their body's propensity for storing fat is higher than with men. So they have a greater reserve of energy at the ready when they need it than men do, because men generally exert more of their energy throughout the day, so there's not as much of a need to store it as fat on the body, whereas with women, it's generally not as rigorous, so it helps in a survival situation sort of thing to have those types of reserves on the ready when you need them. And if you're talking about primitive societies, or even just not even all that long ago, we're talking like a few hundred years ago, maybe like 1,000 or so, but that's a reality. I mean, that's a reality that is interesting to think about. I find analyzing the human body and the biology within and the parameters of all of the systems that make up the body, including most fundamentally the cognition portion, to be particularly interesting, because I think people don't understand how truly complicated and unknowable the human mind and emotion and the state of mood is. It's so ungodly complicated. It is so complicated. There are so many different systems feeding into how you feel that you probably don't even think and consider every single one of them when you're going into whatever mood you're in. Sometimes I just feel like shit. Like, sometimes I'll be sitting there like, man, I feel like fucking shit right now. And I could probably figure out why if I thought long enough about it. But fundamentally, if you feel like shit, there is a reason. And you have to work to figure out what the reason is. And if you're really deep in that, and I haven't been deep in that for quite a while since I've changed my lifestyle. If you're deep in that, you need to fucking really think and really analyze not just the things that you're doing mentally, because you have to remember the mind is just one component of your body. You got all this still. That all feeds into the mind. Eyes, nose, ears, rest of the body. That all feeds into the mind. Environment, diet, all of that affects your mental state. And you need to seriously consider, when you're thinking about yourself and your emotions and your moods, what am I doing to myself? How am I living? Is it consistent with how the body was meant to be? Is it consistent with what the body that I have evolved to deal with? And if the answer is even sort of no, analyze that. Think about what you can do to maybe task yourself, if you're a man, even a woman, to task yourself, to force yourself to deal with things that your primitive ancestors may have had to deal with, because that's what you're meant to suffer. And I've talked about this before. Your body exists to suffer. You exist to suffer because it provides you with wisdom and knowledge and an understanding of the world that cannot be come simply through scholastic or, philosophical ideation or understanding. You need to go out there and you need to fucking do things. You need to see the extremes. You need to be the man that you wish you were. It's not going to just happen someday. You're not going to fucking, wake up one day, get out of bed and say, man, all of a sudden I got all the muscles. I'm ready to go. It's not going to happen. You have to do it. You have to make the world that you want to see. You have to make the world that you want to be in. It's not going to just happen. And if you continue to sit there without trying to test yourself and your abilities and your ability to cope with situations that are extreme, dire, or complicated, unideal, you're never going to know. You're never going to know whether you could or couldn't deal with it. And because of the human mind has a natural drive to be more pessimistic, especially when there is no experience. So the only way to beat a lot of negative perceptions of the self is to challenge the self. It's not going to be comfortable. It's going to be fucking miserable. And I'm not putting that lightly. You are going to have a really tough time at first. You're going to have a really tough time at first trying to figure this shit out. You're going to have a tough time getting out of your comfort zone and doing things that you otherwise wouldn't really consider doing. But once you're used to it, and once you start seeing that, wait a minute, I have the potential. I have the ability. I have it at my fingertips. I can fucking do it. Once you realize that, your life's going to change quite a bit. The options you think you can take are going to change. Your perception of the self and the people around you are going to change. And the perception of your future and what you can do is going to change. And it can be as simple as starting with eating less. Fasting is an interesting thing, and I think a lot of people should try fasting if you aren't in a position where you can be cold more often, I guess is something I'm trying to say. Because I had to do that out of necessity. If I'm able to adjust with being cold, I don't have to burn as much wood, which means I don't have to save as much wood, which means it saves me time to do other things. So, if you're not in a position where you can be colder, just in general, eat less. Fucking do fasting, or fucking, if you have a problem with masturbation, masturbate less. Like, really just task yourself to change yourself in small, minute ways and realize that the body has such crazy potential in it. And I think your life is going to change and your perception of reality is going to change if you really think about that. I don't know if this was helpful. Hopefully I didn't just ramble. I think I got it at what I was trying to say. This was a little more frenzied, but hopefully I got something across.